Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. I hope you're doing well. It's been a while since I've taken a look at this one, so I thought today was the day for me to revisit my top 5 unfinished fantasy series. So with this one, the criteria is very simple. It must be an unfinished series in that the author hasn't yet written the last book in the series, or at least hasn't released the last book as yet. And also, I must have read at least 2 of the books that have been released. I don't need to be up to date, but I have to have read at least 2 of the books that have come out so far. Now admittedly, when I was looking at this and compiling my updated list, there wasn't a vast library of series for me to choose from. I'm not in the middle of too many series that haven't been completed, or I've only read 1 book, so they don't qualify this year for it. I have included series in the past where I've only read 1 book, but I don't think it's really a fair kind of perception of the series. I wanted more than that, and in previous videos I had even less to choose from, if I'm honest, so I did include some of those titles. Anyway, with that little preamble out of the way, I'm going to dive straight in. There are no honourable mentions, so I'm heading straight into number 5 on the list, and I'm going with The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. This one's been kind of up and down on my list in the past 2 iterations of this series that I have done, and I guess it does kind of suffer a little bit from recency bias, if I'm honest. I'm currently in the middle of reading Oathbringer, book 3 in this series, and I'm not having the greatest of times with it. Maybe that would change for better or worse by the time I finish the book. But as we are at the moment, I'm not enjoying it as much as I enjoyed this one, Words of Radiance, book 2 in the series. I do love overall the world that you've got. It's so expansive. You've got all of these weird and wonderful things with the Spren and the Kremlings and shard blades and shard plate. I do feel like the shard bearers are a little bit overpowered, and they do take away some of the, I guess, the mystery and the intensity of battle, because although there is a bit in a couple of the books where it suggests that a group of regular soldiers can take down a shard bearer, they're too scared to do so, generally speaking. So it seems like you've just got these overpowered warriors who can just win a battle on their own. And I have to admit, that doesn't really work too well for me with the type of battle scenes that I enjoy reading. With this one overall, I think the characters are pretty good. There are some highs and some lows, as you'll generally get everywhere. I don't necessarily agree with the general consensus of the highs or the lows, but that's good, I think, because I'm making my own decision on them. But overall, I do think there are a good bunch of characters that I can enjoy following their stories as they progress. I want to find more about the world. I want to find more about the story and what happens and what's going on. But it has slipped down my list a little bit, just because I'm not having the greatest of experiences with the 3rd book in the series, and the amount of time that it's taken me to get this far through the series, it tells me that I'm not as excited to continue as I am with some other titles on the list. So The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson does slip down my list this year to 5th position. Coming in at number 4, and this is one where I've now read 2 books in the series. There are only 2 that have been released. It's The Ill-Born Saga by Daniel T. Jackson. Now, a lot of people don't like certain elements of this. I generally hear that it's either the female characters, or one female character in particular, they don't like the way she acts, her motivations and so forth, or it's the religious aspect of it. Now, for me, I actually do quite like the religious aspect. I like the kind of holy war and persecution that's going on here. I think it gives a really good and interesting element to the story. The characters, I do enjoy all of them. I don't have the same kind of misgivings a lot of people have for the character of Alanna. I think she's fine. I get the motivations. They're not the sort of motivations that I normally tend to follow or appreciate, but I don't have a problem with them. They make sense and they fit into the story. I love the way that we're not really sure for all of our main 4 characters who's good and who's bad. The kind of general perception initially is that these are 4 good characters, but certainly in this book, more than the first one, they do kind of start to bend and our perceptions are warped a little bit, and we can see that's not necessarily the case for all of them. I do like the world that we've got in here. I'm not entirely sure exactly how much of it we're going to see and where we're going to go in the story and the individual arcs that the characters have, but there are for me some standout characters in here. I like the interactions that they have with each other. I like the idea of them kind of being able to sense each other, and especially if we are going to end up with people on different sides of the conflict to come, how that's all going to play out and what's going to happen with it. I do really like the writing in here, and I think the battles are written with a pretty good intensity, but overall the plot in this second book in the series, Age of All Sin, for me the second half of it especially, I really did enjoy it, and for quite a chunky book I did get through this at a pretty quick pace. Third on my list, and it's another slip, this was actually last year's number one. It's The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill. I've had such a good time with this series. It is absolutely going to remain on my top list until it moves off when it finishes. I have no doubt about that. And when it does finish, I'm pretty sure it'll move along to my top fantasy series of all time, which has different criteria where the series must be complete. This second book in the series of Darkness and Light is one of my all-time favourites. I had such a good time with this one. The reason it slipped down is kind of twofold. One is the other books that I've got on the list, but also I didn't enjoy the third book quite as much. It was a little bit too long, it went on a little bit too far for me, and that did just slightly tarnish my perception of the series overall. I have absolutely no doubt that that will be rectified with the fourth and the fifth book in the series, and I'm really going to enjoy them, and it's going to be a case of being back on form for me. But that takes nothing away from the fact that it is a really enjoyable series overall. As well as the main books in the series, I do also really like the accompanying novellas that you get with this. You've got The Fall, The Exile and The Ice. They all add so much to the series, and I really do appreciate that. What I love as well about this, you've got 5 main books plus those novellas. They are all very chunky, so there is so much for you to get involved in here, so much for you to get your teeth into, and the story just burns along at a great pace, but it's not too fast. It doesn't feel rushed at any point for me. I feel like we move along from one storyline to another, and they're all interwoven really well. It doesn't feel disjointed or anything along those lines. It just feels like a very well crafted story. A great world, some great characters. I love the magic that you've got in here and the dragon connections that that some of the characters have. And overall, I feel like it is such an engrossing tale, and one that I just cannot wait to continue. Moving on quickly then to number 2 in my list, and I'm heading into the territory of one of my favourite authors. It's John Gwynne with the Bloodsworn Saga. So book 2, The Hunger of the Gods, I thought was a big improvement on book 1, but that was purely because I was more at home in the world and the characters and all of the different aspects that you've got. This one has a very Norse feel. It's there's a lot of kind of Viking-esque warriors and long ships and raiding parties and things like that. Some of the language as well is definitely inspired by kind of Norse mythology and ancient Scandinavian languages as well. And I really appreciate that, because I don't think it's difficult to get into for all of those language differences. Everything is either subtly explained or it's kind of obvious as to what they're referring to. So you don't need a dictionary to get through this. You don't need any outside sources to help you understand what's going on in here. The characters are great. I love the I don't know, I kind of hesitate to call it magic. It's more the mythology. You've got these ancient gods, and they're slowly being kind of brought back to life in a sense after they effectively killed each other off many centuries ago. I love that aspect of it, and the power that some of these people, the characters in the story, have because of their link to these gods. I think that is handled really well. No one is too kind of overpowered for it, and I really do appreciate that, because it means that you go into a battle, and although you've got people who have these abilities and these strengths, you know that none of them are invincible. They can all hold their own against each other, because the skills kind of not necessarily negate each other, but they do mean that everyone has their own advantages and maybe disadvantages. I think it kind of levels the playing field in that respect, and I really do appreciate it. The world is really fascinating. I love reading and finding out more about it. I do like the characters. It kind of seems to be a bit of a theme with me, but some of the characters who others tend to not like so much, I do quite like. I like Elva as one of my favourites in this book, where people think that she is perhaps one of the weakest. Orca is a very good character, but everyone seems to love her. I don't love her quite as much. She's not my favourite in the book, but I definitely appreciate her and love reading her story as well. Overall, it's a fantastic series and one that I can't wait to continue, and I think round out my time because I think it is closing out as a trilogy. So with that one down, we come to number 1, the top unfinished series that I'm reading at the moment. And I'm giving this one to The Dragon Spirits by L.L. McRae. So again, it's a fantastic year for the indie. It's another self-published fantasy that comes out on top here. I really, really love L.L. McRae's writing. On another day, next year perhaps, maybe she'll have 2 series in here because I'm really enjoying the world of Linaria as well, which I'm reading, which is her other ongoing series. But this one, to focus on the Shadowgate, again, it's all about the dragons here. I love the different take that she has on dragons in pretty much everything she writes, but here I love the kind of the spirit dragons and how they coalesce out of the air. They each have their own kind of different affinities, whether it's a forest or an ice field or a body of water, and I love how that works and how it's integrated to the story. I like the characters that you've got in here, and we've got some really interesting elements. One of the characters has essentially no feelings, so she can't feel if she stepped on something sharp and broken the skin on her foot, for instance. She won't necessarily know that until she sees the evidence of it or someone points it out to her. And it leads to some really interesting kind of scenarios as she's going along, not realising that she's hurt, not realising that she's hungry, not realising that she's got certain feelings, basically. It's just a really interesting element. You've got some different tropes like the amnesia trope, which I don't generally tend to enjoy too much, but were really well handled in here. I love some of the other elements that are coming into it as well, with the Myr, this mysterious kind of enemy coming back to the fore, and we're starting to learn more about them and their impact on the world, and you can see these great battles kind of forming on the horizon. In this book, you've got a fantastic battle between 2 behemoths of the air, 2 big dragons who are duking it out in the skies, and we've got our characters trying to kind of stay away from it and not get involved, not find themselves as collateral damage in this battle. So I thought that was really interesting the way it played out as well. It was a very intense scene. I love the writing style in here. I love the overall storyline. The world itself is great for me. It just really, really works, and it's definitely one that if you haven't read, I highly recommend it. You can start with The Citrine Key, which is a prequel novella, or you can start with The Iron Crown, which is book 1 in the series. The novella is set a few years before book 1, but you don't actually have to read it first. I did. That's my preferred way of doing things, but you can read it afterwards as well. Either way, I highly recommend that you read all 3, whichever way you read them. Citrine Key, The Iron Crown, and book 2 in the series proper is The Shadowgate. All 3 are fantastic. I've really enjoyed my time with them, and L.L. McRae, congratulations. This is my number 1 unfinished fantasy series in 2023. So there we go, that's my up-to-date rundown of my top unfinished fantasy series that I'm currently reading. Let me know in the comments down below, what are your favourite unfinished fantasy series and what did you think of my top 5? I'll hopefully catch you in the next video sometime soon. Until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.